Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and it's always nice to start the new year off with a new quilt or a new quilted tablecloth. And I have a quick and easy one that starts with big 9.5-inch squares. The fabric I'm going to be using for this project is from Timeless Treasures, and it's their row by row fabric. Taste the experience. It has this big print and some really fun prints to go with it. It also has a very large border print. This border print is going to go around the outside of the quilt, and the inside is only going to consist of 4 big blocks. The pattern I'm using is also from Timeless Treasures, but it's not designed to go with this fabric, but I think it's going to look great with this. And we get to start by cutting 4 big 9.5-inch squares. This is a great size if we want a fussy cut or use those big, beautiful fabrics that we don't want to cut up. This 9.5-inch square has 2 different fabrics that are going to go around. We have one in one corner and the opposite in the opposite corners. And the pieces are very easy to cut. We're going to start with 8 of these reds, cut 2 inches by 5 inches. 4 will go on one side, 4 will go on the other. The same size is going to be cut in the black and white, 2 inches by 5 inches. And we were going to have these 4 to match those 4 centers. We also need 8 of the longer pieces, 2 inches by 6.5 inches. Same with the black and white, 2 inches by 6.5 inches. And this is going to give us 2 corners of one fabric and 2 corners of the second fabric. We are going to be able to start and sew our small 5-inch strips together. So all of the 8 are going to be stitched together. The same with the 8 strips cut at 2 inches by 6.5 inches. Those also will need to be stitched together. So we could just take these to the machine and stitch them together along those short edges using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And we will have 8 small units and 8 large units. From here we need to check that placement so that we have the reds in one corner and the black and white in the other. And these 4 strips are going to get sewn on to those 4 9.5-inch blocks. Once the 2 sides are done, we're going to be able to sew on the next 2 sides. Match up our corner colors and stitch a 1/4 inch. This is all there is to the finished blocks. This is going to make a square quilt or a square tablecloth. If you want it rectangular, you will need to make 2 more units. And you'll see this as we go along. We now get to sew these together, and we're going to do a sashing down the center. We need to lay out the 4 blocks so that we have the matching fabrics coming into the center. The opposite side is the color of the sashing we are going to do. We need 4 strips 1.5 inches by 12.5 inches. And they're going to go in between. That's going to give us a space for 1.5 inches square. So when these are put together, it's going to appear like a very big block. And these outside pieces will all blend together. So we can sew these blocks together in rows and then sew those rows onto this long strip. The center of the quilt is done. If we need to make it rectangular, we're going to take 2 more blocks, put them on the end, and add the sashing with another little cornerstone. From here, we're going to do 1 more row of this thin little sashing. It's cut at 1.5 inches, and we will need 2 pieces cut at 25.5 inches and 2 pieces cut at 27.5 inches. Put the short ones on first, then we're going to be able to put on those sides. With that final 1.5 inch border put on, we're going to be able to put on the last border. The pattern has the border cut at 3 inches. But because the fabric came with this great border print, I'm going to add a 9.5-inch border print on all sides. If you'd like, you can miter the corners and have that all one big border with the print going all the way around. But I'm going to add 4 cornerstones. Whatever size your border is going to be, the cornerstones will also need to be. So this is 9.5 inches. I need 9.5-inch cornerstones. The cornerstones can be whatever blocks you want. It could match the center or one of the fabrics and just have a solid block. We can also do half square triangles. But I'm going to turn these corners into hourglass blocks. To make the first half square triangle, we need to take a nice big square, and I have mine at about 12 inches. I'm going to match it with the same fabric that I used in that center. Make sure right sides are together. Draw a line from corner to corner, stitch down both sides, and then cut that apart. When we cut that apart, we will have a half square triangle. And we really don't need to square this up right now because we can square it up after. So I have 1 half square triangle with the dark and that center print, and a half square triangle with my check and that center print. I can place the right sides together so that my center print is on opposite sides, and match up that center seam. That seam should be really tight against the seam underneath. And you can see I haven't trimmed it up yet. Draw a line from corner to corner. Now I can stitch on both sides of that line. When that seam is cut apart, I will have 4 of these hourglass blocks. To start with, I had 1 black square, 1 plaid square, and 2 of these printed squares. I started with 12 inches, did the half square triangles, cut them apart, pressed them, and then turned them into the hourglass blocks. So they're a generous size, so we're going to be able to trim them down to the size of border that you would like. And since my border print is at 9.5 inches, I will trim this down to 9.5 inches, keeping my center point in the center. Once those hourglass blocks are trimmed to size, I can sew those 2 large borders on each side. So the hourglass blocks on the 2 sides of each of the top and bottom strips, and then those borders will go right on. And this is going to be a lot of fun to play with because it can go 4 different ways. With the border on, we are now done. If you're going to use that big border print all the way around and miter those corners, I would recommend 1.5 yards. That's going to give you enough fabric to do those proper miters. The quilt is done and it is a lot of fun. These big squares could really have any type of fabric in them. It doesn't have to be a tablecloth. It would make a great child's quilt where you can put big, bold prints inside. There's so many different options for this quilt. Those squares are easy to do, and with a little bit of sashing, it's already done. Because I added that big border on, my quilt does equal 46 inches. I'll put a link in the description to the pattern, and as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.